NSA agent's final warning. The alien I spoke with knew everything about Earth. He didn't walk out with files. He walked out with a sentence he couldn't shake. They know our past, and they're timing our future. In the headset, the tone didn't speak words. It pressed intent, like a hand on the back of your neck. Low, mid, high, then a held breath where meaning lived. Observation rights. No broadcast. No interference. The room called it procedure. He called it a trap with dates. He was an NSA tech sergeant trained to pull order from noise. The program tuned him to become the signal. Chair, tones, grids, ideograms. Then the cadence shifted, and a presence leaned in. It wasn't human. It knew coastlines that don't match our maps, resets we pretend are myths, and windows where systems fail together. It offered warnings, quiet, precise, stamped like weather notices from a future we'd rather negotiate than face. This wasn't a ghost story. It was a brief. 2 signatures, 2 agendas. One that warns, one that optimizes. One wants timing and restraint. The other wants compliance and throughput. He logged both until logging became consent. Today, you'll see the recruitment nobody talks about, the chair that makes a mind a receiver, the dates that lined up and the drills that followed, and the ask he says we can't afford to grant. He calls it his final warning because the windows don't care about our calendars, and because the program's rules are simple. Save face first, save people if it fits. If he's right, the next interval isn't about belief. It's about whether honest signals reach anyone in time. The recruitment nobody talks about. Dan Sherman wasn't a myth when he walked into Fort Meade. He was a signals guy with a clean record and a habit of seeing patterns others missed. Early in his career, aptitude tests flagged him as an anomaly. He didn't outscore everyone. He just tripped sensors no one admitted existed. On paper, he tracked emitters, wrote clean sitreps, and stayed late because he liked coaxing meaning from noise. Off paper, a separate file started following him. Get this, one morning after a standard systems checkout, he's asked to retake an innocuous cognitive battery. Same questions, different order. Then a sensory test, tones, notched noise, subaudible pulses. He marks what he perceives, and the proctor frowns like he's seeing a ghost. A week later, the reassignment hits. Routine rotation, they say. Same pay grade, better clearance. It reads like a reward, until he's escorted across campus to a corridor with no windows, where badges become bracelets and names become numbers. The office didn't look like a lab. It was quiet in a way that eats sound. No posters, no unit patches, no clocks. There's a chair that doesn't belong in any comms suite, a heavy frame with padded rests, grounding straps at the wrists, and a small panel with 3 backlit buttons. A man with the posture of a handler greets him. Cover story first. You'll be supporting emerging collection methodologies. Special access. You'll learn on the job. Sherman nods, because that's what you do. But the real task comes in the second briefing, the one that happens after the door seals and the air hums. The man slides a thin binder across the table. No title on the cover, just a symbol that isn't a symbol, 3 interlocking arcs. He says the program's lineage is deniable and compartmented beyond code word. It has existed beside official efforts, feeding them selectively. Your job, he says, isn't to intercept signals. It's to become one. Here's where the story tilts. The handler explains the chair. It's a calibration device, not a restraint. You sit. You listen to a 3-tone sequence. Low, mid, high. The tones aren't music. They're scaffolding. Some people hear them and nothing happens. Others, very few, hear them and something else wakes up. Not a hallucination, he insists. Think of it like a receiver pulling a signal out of the noise floor when the filter snaps into place. Sherman laughs, a reflex against absurdity. He came up through radar sweeps and spectrum analysis, not crystals and candles. But the handler's language isn't mystical. It's procedural. Sessions, logs, accuracy metrics. He mentions legacy programs and lineal disciplines that were shut down publicly and reopened privately. Call it remote viewing if you want. They didn't. They called it lexical transmission. You won't ask questions, the handler says, and you won't speculate. You'll record. The carrots come out methodically. Promotion track, housing bump, a clearance that opens vaults he didn't know were in the building. The stick is softer. Non-compliance looks like instability, and instability closes doors forever. He signs, because service culture trains you to trust the room you're in. He tells himself he can leave if it gets weird. The handler doesn't smile. It will get weird, he says. That's why you're here. Day 1 of the pipeline starts with deprivation by design. No. Phone. No watch. No personal pens. He's led to the chair. The tech straps conductive pads to his wrists, not as cuffs but as grounding points. ECG leads trace a polite map across his chest. In the corner, a tape machine whirs softly, redundancy, even in a digital age. They tell him the tones will run for 3 minutes. All he has to do is note anything that arrives. He asks what that means. You'll know, the handler says, and to his own surprise, Sherman believes him. The tones hit. Low mid-high. Low mid-high. On the 5th cycle, his temples throb. On the 7th, a pressure behind his eyes. On the 9th, a crescent of light that isn't light fans across his inner field, and with it a sensation he would later describe as a block sliding into contact. Not a vision. An impression packed too tight to parse all at once. He writes the only thing that feels like a label. 3x3 grid, bottom left quadrant, diagonal stroke. The handler leans forward, not to help, but to witness. Good, he says flatly. Keep going. Over the next week, the lexicon arrives in pieces. Idoggrams that map to textures, metallic, granular, empty, alive. Coordinates delivered as numeric cues he's trained not to question. 27.51 N, 33.97 E. He sketches a jagged coastline before his conscious mind registers the Red Sea. He writes dry heat, then hears the handler's pen scratch. No context ever, just data blocks that come like compressed files. If he opens them too fast, the headache flares. Too slow, they dissolve. There's a moment when he almost quits. Mid-session, his nose starts bleeding. The tone sequence has shifted slightly, still low mid-high but sharper, like the edges have been honed. He tastes copper, feels the chair through his spine. Afterward, in the small room with the green painted walls, he asks for a day off. The handler reminds him of the metrics. Accuracy is trending up. They're achieving coupling. He goes home, sleeps 12 hours, and dreams in lattices. Meanwhile, the cover story grows legs. His official section thinks he's been seconded to a joint task force on satellite interception. His pay stubs reflect hazard duty. He learns to keep 2 calendars, one with coffee breaks and chatter, one with blank blocks that swallow afternoons. He stops explaining his days to friends. He stops seeing some of them. Isolation isn't ordered. It just happens. 2 weeks in, the first verifiable hit lands like a test he didn't know he was taking. He's cued, logs a sequence of numbers and the ideogram for spire, then the impression cold metal shadow. Days later, in a sanitized read-in, a second team confirms a satellite pass time, the silhouette of a structure, and a transient telemetry glitch that matches his notes to the minute. The room doesn't celebrate. No high fives, no good job. Just more pages to fill. It dawns on him, they're not hunting trophy intel. They're calibrating him. In a quiet moment, the handler drops a line that sticks. Our tech can do a lot, he says, but some things hide from it. They don't hide from you. Sherman asks what they are. The handler ignores the pronoun and taps the chair. The tones help you change enough to be heard. That's the point. He doesn't say by whom. He tries a joke about crystal balls. No one laughs. The room breathes on, clinical, detached, obsessed with numbers, never context. Accuracy over understanding. He starts to notice how questions make the air tighter. So he stops asking. He leans into the work. The sessions lengthen. The afterglow, his word for the exhausted clarity that follows, becomes addictive. He leaves the chair vibrating and sits in his car until the hum fades. The pipeline closes around him like a glove. He's part of something he can't explain, built on a program lineage that never officially existed. The chair, the tones, the lexicon, each piece snaps into place, and with it, a sense of dangerous purpose. He thinks he's communicating with locations, with objects, with human-made secrets. He doesn't know yet that the signal is about to talk back, that the calibration tones were never just for him. Once training starts, the rules get strange, and one day, the voice in the headset won't be human, training the mind to transmit. The rules arrived on a single sheet with no masthead. Fixed sessions, isolation, numeric queuing, no questions. He signed beneath a line that said, I understand, and didn't. Twice a day, same room, same chair, same 3 tones. Low mid-high, then a gap like a held breath. The handler sat behind glass with a legal pad, a metronome in human form. Sherman's job was simple on paper. Translate what wasn't words into something a human archive could hold. They taught him the lexicon the way a technician learns a panel. Function first, poetry never. Start with grids. 9 squares to place impressions before you name them. Upper left for sky, lower right for subterranean, middle for human-made. Then ideograms, a quick mark for structure, a curl for water, a spike for energy, a broken line for void. If an impression hit harder than a single mark could hold, he wrapped it in brackets and labeled it a data block. The trick was to crack those later without breaking them. Numeric queuing felt like a prank until it didn't. A handler's voice delivered 2 strings, task key, focus key. 9441-3x, 12 delta. He wrote them at the top of the page, then waited. The tones ran under his awareness like a diesel engine beneath a ship's deck. On good days, the first impression crept in, a texture, a temperature, the sense of open or confined. On bad days, nothing. He learned that nothing was still something if it was clean. They loved clean. No questions meant none, ever. Not where or who or why now. He learned to file the curiosity, the way you file a burr from a tool edge. Questions bent results. Bent results failed metrics. Metrics were the god in the room. Accuracy was scored in shards. Hit the coordinate region, get a point. Match a hidden attribute, get 2. Pull a transient detail, get a star that didn't show on any official performance report. Stars became a quiet currency. He pretended not to care and cared. The body paid first. Migraines gripped his temples like a vice as soon as a session ended. He kept tissues within reach for nosebleeds that came without warning, a thin red line down a white page. Afterglow was the eerie flip side, a weighted calm that settled over him for an hour, like the air in a church after everyone leaves. He'd sit in the parking lot and watch wind move across the tops of trees and think, this is what being tuned feels like. Then the hum faded and the world came back a little too loud. The handler's face never changed. Clinical, detached, a man who loved other people's precision. Annotate, he'd say when Sherman hesitated. You're not here to edit. Context lived behind the glass and didn't cross the line. When a hit landed, a coordinate that mapped to a polar research station, a name that matched a call sign, a satellite pastime that nailed the second, no one said good job. A pen scratched, a page turned, a tone restarted. It wasn't personal. He told himself he liked that. Verifiable hits came less as applause, and more as proof that the lexicon wasn't a fairy tale. A sequence sparked the feel of sun bouncing off a mirrored surface, the ideogram for vertical, then artificial. A week later, a heavily redacted briefing confirmed a test article at a desert range with a tower he'd sketched before he knew what it was. Another session coughed up a name embedded in a data block, 3 syllables he didn't recognize. The follow-up read-in called it a non-attributable, which meant they weren't going to tell him if he'd nailed it. He learned to live with half answers. What nobody voiced, he felt. The room wasn't waiting for better intel. It was waiting for something to pick him. The tones weren't just a key, they were an invitation. We're getting coupling, the handler said once, which was as close to enthusiasm as he got. Hold the frame. Holding the frame meant letting impressions arrive without chasing them. It meant staying inside the grid, even when the block wanted to explode off the page. The sequence deepened. Grids led to layered grids, ideograms chained into short phrases, data blocks stacked like freight. He practiced cracking a block in 3 passes, first for physical attributes, then for energy, then for intent. Intent wasn't supposed to be possible, he was told. Still, they had a column for it. When intent arrived as a pressure rather than a picture, he learned to write presence and leave it at that. The handler liked presence. He circled the word as if it were an address. Fatigue set in like a second skin. He drank too much coffee. He stopped running in the mornings. His wrist ached from writing, and he asked if he could type. Hand to paper, the handler said. The loop matters. On a particularly raw afternoon, the tones seemed sharper, almost angular. The first impression was wrong-footed, an empty feeling where structure usually sat. He wrote void, and felt a laugh that wasn't a laugh roll through his body. He closed his eyes, counted the breath, reopened them. Annotate, the voice behind the glass said. He wrote void persists, and the laugh evaporated. He started noticing coincidences he couldn't file under chance. A session full of wet, motion, metal hull, and cold preceded an unannounced fire drill in his building that routed them past a sealed door he'd never seen used. Another day, right after he logged pressure wave and underground, a calendar update slid into his cover account with a meeting note for a department he didn't work for and an agenda line reading contingencies. He told himself to stop connecting dots that weren't his to connect. Meanwhile, the handlers adjusted knobs he wasn't allowed to see. Session lengths crept from 20 minutes to 45, then an hour. The space between the tones changed, identical notes, different timing like a language-shifting tense. "This one's a calibration," the handler said, and Sherman felt the block arrive smoother, less jagged at the edges. He wrote faster without thinking. Afterward, his hands trembled as if he'd held a current. They added sensory gates into the protocol. Earplugs to block HVAC hum. A weighted blanket across his legs to dampen fidget reflex. Lights dimmed until the room felt like twilight. Every 20 minutes, a chime that wasn't one of the three tones reminded him to shake his hands out and blink hard so he didn't disappear into the field. Disappearing was discouraged. "Stay at the edge," the handler said. "You're the translator. Don't become the message." At home, life narrowed. He stopped sleeping with the TV on because stray dialogue rebooted impressions he didn't want. He began keeping a glass of water by the bed and woke to find it empty without remembering drinking it. He carried a small notebook and forced himself to write mundane things in it, milk, laundry, so his brain had somewhere ordinary to land. On Sundays, he'd drive without a destination and only feel right when he hit empty stretches where transmission towers marched across fields. Steel made him calm. Sometimes the lexicon failed. A data block arrived so dense it felt like a stone pressed against his sternum. He tried to split it and got nothing but headache. He tried again the next day, and the block unraveled into 3 clean lines that made no sense together. Lattice, dates, strata. The handler underlined dates and said nothing. A week later, a different block coughed up a word that wasn't a word. Seating. He wrote it, then crossed it out, then wrote it again. Annotate came from the glass. He left both. By the end of the month, routine had become ritual. Chair, tones, grid, ideograms, blocks, afterglow. He wasn't intercepting. He was being intercepted by patterns that knew his steps better than he did. The metrics climbed and the room's silence thickened, waiting. The tech in him loved the precision. The human in him felt a draft from a door he couldn't see. The protocol said no questions. The tones said hold the frame. Then, during an afternoon session, the cadence inside the low-mid-high shifted. Something leaned in. Presence, not pressure. He steadied his pen and wrote the only honest thing he could. "It's not us." The first unmistakable reply. The tones rose, fell, and then paused longer than usual. Half a heartbeat stretched thin. In that gap, something arrived with intent. The first impression wasn't texture or temperature. It was attention. The grid he always saw in his mind tilted, like someone had reached in and turned it a few degrees. He wrote presence and felt the air pull tight around the word. Low-mid-high returned, but the cadence had a human rhythm, a kind of inhale-exhale he'd never felt in training. He didn't chase it. He logged it. His hand shook anyway. Then came the marker. It wasn't a word or a tone. It was a repeated shape that cut across his inner field the same way a call sign cuts through chatter. 3 strokes, nested, a shallow arc over a vertical line with a short horizontal tick. It flashed, receded, flashed again. He drew it without thinking. The pressure in his ears eased, as if the room had acknowledged he'd seen it. He circled the mark. The handler's pen scratched. The legal pad turned a page. "Continue," came through the intercom, steady as ever. The rule changed while he was still catching up. Numeric cueing had always pulled him toward something, a site, an object, a person. This time, impressions rushed in like a flood through a breached gate. He hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't been tasked to a coordinate or a name. Still, the block arrived on its own. Dense, cold at the edges, hot in the center. He labeled it block unsolicited, bracketed the ideograms for energy and structure, and waited for the pain that usually came when he cracked a block too soon. It didn't come. The block opened itself. The first fragment was a lattice, clean, geometric, like scaffolding seen from below. It spun, not visually, but in the way a concept rotates to show you a different face. Numbers stacked along its edges. Dates, at least that's how his mind mapped them, but not Gregorian neat. Some felt like seasons, others like intervals between pulses. He wrote lattice of time, then scratched out time and replaced it with timing. The distinction mattered in a way he couldn't explain. His pen moved. Strata landed on the page next, unbidden. Layers of earth, yes, but also layers of record. He followed it down. A word that wasn't a word pushed up through the strata. He heard it without sound, a shape inside his mouth he hadn't made, seating. It wasn't pronunciation. It was a pressure that resolved his meaning. He wrote seating, then paused, then wrote it again, a question mark after the second. The marker flashed, arc, line, tick, and with it came a feeling he can only describe as acknowledgement. Not approval, not affection, just a note in the margin received. Sherman froze, the way you do when you realize you're being watched from behind glass you thought was a mirror. His eyes went to the window out of habit. The handler leaned toward the mic. Just log it, don't engage. The words were calm, practiced. This had been briefed in halls he hadn't walked yet. The part of him trained for chain of command fell into place. He wrote. He didn't speak. Action kicked back in. He split the unsolicited block into 3 passes. Physical. Sedimentary layers disturbed at depth, voids where solid should be, lines of force that felt like wires through rock. Energy. Faint at the surface, strong at 2 nodes, cycling like a heartbeat. Intent. He hesitated, then wrote monitoring, and immediately regretted assigning a motive. He bracketed it in pencil. The marker flashed once, arc, line, tick, and fell still. He kept going. He tagged the first set of dates with a simple mark, so he could come back, a tiny triangle in the margin. Then he wrote numbers the way they pressed in, 12, 19, 37, not years, not days, just units with weight. He copied them cleanly, then added a short line that felt like a header. Window. He didn't know if that was his interpretation or a piece of the message. He underlined it twice to remind himself not to fight over ownership later. Ownership didn't matter. Fidelity did. As soon as the tones faded, protocol snapped shut around him like a lid. The handler came in, took the pages, and disappeared without commentary. 10 minutes later, a second person he'd seen only twice stepped into the room with a clipped request. Walk me through your sequence order. He did, careful not to add adjectives he hadn't logged. When he said seating, the new face didn't flinch or ask why he'd chosen that word. He just said, spell it, and left. Immediate verification wasn't usually immediate. This time it was. He was read into a compartment within the compartment and shown a single graphic, a map layered with known seismic lines. 2 anomalies glowed in places that should have been quiet. Buried features, the briefer said, long suspected, never confirmed, recently hinted at by a classified sensor test. He wasn't told where. He didn't ask. He watched a cursor circle a region that matched the feeling of his lower left grid, subterranean, artificial voids, cycling energy. He waited for the room to acknowledge the hit. It didn't. The briefer closed the file. Continue sessions. The entity, he resisted the word, then gave up and used it privately, returned 2 days later, right when the tones hit that longer pause. The marker flashed. Presence sat with him like someone just outside the door. The data stream pushed again without tasking. This time he logged the cadence itself, 3 beats, gap, 2 beats, longer gap. He began to sense that the gaps held as much as the notes. He wrote interval carries content, and the handler circled it in red, which he'd never seen before. The second block unfurled with less resistance. Images that aren't images arrived in order. Glacial melt lines overlaid with arithmetic. A city plan carved into mud and erased clean. A bone, human, with an edge smoothed by hands and time. He put down before cities, not as poetry, but as the only phrase that fit the pressure. Numbers ticked along the side again. Different units. Same header in his mind. Window. He logged them carefully. His nose started to bleed. He kept writing. He tested a small boundary. Not a question, not technically. He added a clarifying bracket to the word seating. Biological? The room's air tightened. He felt it. The marker flashed, but not like before. The arc flattened. The line shortened. He wrote, no direct reply. The handler's voice slid through the speaker, a half-degree colder. Stay in protocol. He nodded, even though the glass couldn't see nods. He took the bracket off the page with a single line, left the original intact. Impact landed on him later, alone in his car with the afterglow. If this stream could place dates against layers of Earth and tie them to cycles we barely tracked, then his job had just pivoted from collection to translation of a thing that thought in structures bigger than a single lifetime. He'd been a conduit, sure. Now he was a witness. That felt different. In the next session, the entity led. It pushed a sequence that sketched a coastline he didn't recognize, and the word host pressed into his jaw like a dental ache. He wrote host and waited to see if it would correct him. The marker flashed once, slow, like a nod that wasn't a nod. He felt a thin thread between the block labeled seating and this new line. He didn't connect them on paper. He wasn't going to give anyone a reason to call him subjective. The handlers didn't celebrate the second verification either. A closed meeting. Noted that an off-the-books team had flagged a buried feature with timing that aligned to one of his units, 19, converted to days after a magnetospheric disturbance. He wasn't cleared for the sensor name. He didn't need it to understand the implication. Something with a signature had brushed the planet and left a readable trail. The entity had known the trail would form before it formed. Or it had formed it. He didn't write that last thought anywhere. Sherman caught himself anticipating the sessions, not because the work fed his ego, but because the presence carried a kind of gravity that made everything outside feel lighter, smaller. Then he worried about that feeling and wrote a note to himself in a different notebook. Do not mistake contact for friendship. He underlined it. He also wrote, "We are out of our league," then scratched it out, then left the scratch visible. The tone gap stretched again in the fourth contact, and with it came a pattern that felt like a request. He couldn't translate it. He wrote request, and then immediately wrote no, because he didn't want to give the room a reason to see him as suggestible. The block pressed harder, so he reverted to the ritual. Grid, Idoggrams, clean marks. Straight up persists. Timing lattice repeats. Seeding recurs. He logged, he didn't engage, and still, in the tiny silent space behind his sternum where words don't fit, he felt the story start. He left the room, and the world looked slightly misaligned, like the furniture had been moved 2 inches while he slept. The handler handed him a fresh legal pad without meeting his eyes.